Welcome, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Leon Caldwell. My name is Randall Drain, and I'm an advisor to the Collective Investment Group. Um, so Leon and I had the opportunity to catch up yesterday, which was great. I got to hear about a lot of his projects, his history, his background, connection to the city. So maybe that's how we'll kick off. If Dr. Caldwell, if you could talk to us a little bit about your experience here in the city and how that's driven your passion as a developer.
Sure. So I'm born and raised in West Philly on 56 and Drive. Went to Our Mother Sorrow's grade school, Penn Charter High School, Lehigh for 2 degrees, and Penn State for a doctorate in counseling psychology. So I've never, all my education's been in Pennsylvania. All my, I would say, born and raised in Philadelphia. So all my rearing was in Philadelphia until I left for college. And even then, I've always been, even though I've been out of the city for that long a time, I've always come back home. So, the saying is you can take a boy out of Philly, but you can't take the Philly out of a boy. So I'm kind of living that in that way. So I've had the fortune of, going around the country and doing things in parts of the globe, and now I'm back home.
That's great. And Philly's better for it now that you're back. It's funny. So Dr. Caldwell and I have a little inside joke in that we are both from Interact schools, and if you're from the area, you know what that is. And he mentioned Penn Charter. I went to a less esteemed, low-rate Interact school. And so I always joke that the collective's clearly pushing the limits because they put the two of us on a panel together and expect us to have a productive conversation, and then, that's risk forward. So so anyway, I was saying before, we talked a lot about your projects in West Philly and elsewhere, but we really honed in on a couple, and one that just stuck with me even after our conversation yesterday was the and I hope I get this right. It's the Steam E development, and so maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that, because I think your approach to double bottom line, and I'd argue this is probably even triple bottom line, is interesting.
Yeah. So thanks, Randall, because it's hard for me to uncouple my kind of projects because of the way I approach development, really as a form of social intervention. I think like my projects are solutions. When I say that, meaning Ujima Developers, which is the name of the company, Ujima means Swahili word that means collective work and responsibility. And what I've essentially tried to build is a company that sits between gentrification and blight. And really what sits between that is having like people, place, and progress. Like that's really where the work is. So most of what I've been able to do is assemble projects in a neighborhood that address two core challenges, I think. And we think of them as strategies for both economic mobility and health and well-being. So in that sense, our work, the actual projects that I invest in, all address economic mobility and health and well-being. So the Steamy workspace is something I came up with a few years ago, probably about 6 years ago, when I realized that the future of work did not include, or preparation for the future of work did not include Black and brown folks, right? And what I was seeing was all of this shift towards technology, conversations around AI and robotics. And I would look in some of the spaces that I had the good fortune of being in, and I may have been one of few people of color. and definitely I didn't see any women. And what concerned me about that is as we kind of prepared ourselves for these shifts, if you will, that we weren't in it. Like, and when I asked, well, you know, we have all this talent in Philly and all this talent really in other places around the country. And with all this talent, you have to ask, well, how does the talent get access to opportunity? And in most of our neighborhoods, that access is pretty limited. So STEAMY workspace, which is STEM, I had an A for art. The M is actually squared for both math and manufacturing. The I is for innovation, and the E is for entrepreneurship. And it really is a urban kind of talent cultivation solution for skilled technical labor and the future of work. So that's what STEAMY is.
Okay. You
All
back?
right. Yeah, you're back.
Okay.
So I just talked about
you were describing the STEAMY.
Yeah, describing STEAMY. And so I left at the point where, you know, in Ujima's kind of holistic, equitable development space, what we wanted to make sure is that we had projects that address economic mobility, of which STEAMY's one, then health and well-being. And that's in the two other projects in the community that address multi-generational housing, and the other is in food insecurity, and we're building a food justice village in one of our projects as well. You're on mute again. So I can talk about my stuff all day. so I'll tell you that until you figure it out, or we may get unbroadcasted again. I think we got unbroadcasted again. So the one piece that we've tried to do with STEAMY is build in like a corridor around making, because essentially STEAMY workspace is a maker space. And I believe that if you can't see it, you can't be it. So within this kind of community, if you will, there's places where people get exposure and access to knowledge and skills for things they wouldn't necessarily get exposure to, like 3D printers, CNC routers, kind of the type of welding that is clearly connected to robotics and other advanced manufacturing skill sets. And these are like really important for a city that is essentially emerging as in some ways the biotech space, but we also have the opportunity to do a bunch of other work in advanced manufacturing. And if you talk to the advanced manufacturers, the one thing they'll tell you is we just can't get talent. And the talent that we're trying to cultivate isn't just technical skills. The talent we're trying to cultivate is both like the hard skills, if you will, or the technical skills, but also what we call the essential navigation skills. And those are things that, I think in the older days, we used to call them soft skills, but they really aren't soft at all. They're highly, high IQ, if you will, high EQ, emotionally intelligent skills that are necessary to navigate the world of work. And these are like really important things that, in our work, in the way STEAMY is structured, it becomes like a place-based strategy to cultivate talent for the future of work. And that future of work then opens up economic opportunities for residents or participants. And because it's not downtown, it's not on anyone's campus, it is essentially situated in a neighborhood. Like, we believe that this is the strategy to support members of the community and throughout Philly, actually, of essentially having a space where they can get skilled up, and that skilling up leads to livable wage jobs in different areas or different sectors of kind of the STEM economy. So, hey, John.
Hey, Dr. Leon, how are you?
I'm doing well.
I am not Randall Drain, but I am going to try to give him some backup. But please keep going. But I always been inspired by how you are the master of integrating health outcomes, work outcomes, and looking, as you said earlier, providing a solution.
Right.
Have you been able to get any returns in this effort? Is this something that by going the very authentic approach to creating a solution, is it a good investment?
Yeah, there is. I think there is a false narrative of, if you do good, you can't do well. And what we're essentially showing is you can do well and do good at the same time. Like our projects pencil out. We're talking about, impact returns of like low teens for some of our projects. For some, it's not the impact actually is the return, right? So, I wrote a paper a couple years ago around the community return on investment. Well, while our project may be an 8% ROI or IRR, the ripple effect are the number of people who are now employed in meaningful jobs, right? And that meaningful job then gets them connected to health insurance. That health insurance gets them connected to a wellness, which then prolongs their life. That prolonged life means they're really willing to invest in residential properties and keep up neighborhoods and things of that nature. So if you think about the cyclical nature, iterative nature of returns, that we don't look at it just one project. We look at like what is the return on the ecosystem in which people live. So if we get 10% out of a project, we're good because we know the next two projects as we start to look in the pipeline, those will increase each time, right? And in some of our neighborhoods, the reality is they've been so disinvested, underinvested, redlined, structured out, whatever you want to call it. We know there's the mechanisms of separating our city financially that leads to the disparities that exist now. Like at the end of the day, that's done nothing but hurt Philadelphia in the big picture. So the shift that we want people to see, particularly the investor class. Of course, there's some neighborhoods which seem hot, right? They seem hot because people make them hot, and they're hot because they're racially segregated in some ways. They're hot because they're economically segregated in other ways. But in the end, the opportunity, and we use kind of an opportunity value method. The opportunity is finding that place that has all the amenities, all the kind of the structure, the infrastructure. But it really is missing, if you will, a scope of work. It's missing a framework in which is intentional on equity. Because the city has not been, developers for the most part have not been concerned about equity. They've been concerned about, their own kind of investor package, right? But there is hopefully a class of investors in Philadelphia looking much broader because that broader piece is a longer term vision. And we think Ujima is positioned in the neighborhood that we're working in. We're positioned to really transform a entire neighborhood into a place where everybody can thrive, right? And that's that really is the vision. Like this whole notion of transformation. It's not just putting a building up. It's not just getting into affordable housing per se. It is what are those things around that not just create minimum wage jobs through fast food restaurants and things of that nature, but what are those things that we invest in that create opportunities for people to have high wage jobs that are beyond jobs but careers? Like what are those things we're investing in where people's health and food? I mean, we're working with Honeysuckle, Omar Tate's food concept, and we're building something in our neighborhood. And as we talk about this, you think about food actually should be medicine for our bodies, right? But most of the food in our neighborhoods, particularly lower income, economic, that food kills you, whether it's the high salt, the preservatives and all the other things in it, right? And we need to shift that. Like we really need to shift. And I think I wrote a paper about essentially I think developers are public health officials, right? Like what we build in our communities really does dictate like what people have access to nourish their bodies, their minds, and their spirits. So it's amazing to me in many high stress, low income neighborhoods how little access to restorative health there is. And we all have like disease management. Of course, the Vita dialysis is all over the place, or some other disease management company. But in predominantly Black, low income, economic disadvantaged neighborhoods, where's the yoga space, right? Where is the space where acupuncture exists? Like, where is the alternatives for health promotion or just mindfulness or restorative health? Right now, the restorative health places that people go are like bars and churches in most neighborhoods, and there's limits to those things, right? So we're just really interested in expanding the vision for our neighborhoods, people's access, and one of the things we talk about what people deserve, right? Like you deserve these things. So in our developments, we think people deserve access, proximity to opportunity, so then they can actually get into careers that are far more than just workforce development. But we're talking about careers that have long-term implications. And just imagine, John and Randall, if there was the steamy workspace, right, on 38th and Girard or 38th Street, and we had two people in a family come down, and one takes up welding, and we know that there's a pipeline for welders going into high wage paying jobs in Philadelphia shipyard. The other takes on, say, cybersecurity, and we know there's a whole market for talent in cybersecurity. So that's two people now probably in combined making $45,000, $50,000 a low wage job. Now individually they're making 65 plus. That household is $120,000, $140,000. That changes the game. It's not even about affordable housing anymore, right? It's really about I can afford whatever house I want. And that's the narrative we want people to leave with, like that piece of hope, that piece of they can see those things they want, and not just material things, but they can see those things that give them pleasure, that like soothe their spirits. And when you find that, then our city's gonna feel a lot different, right? Like the tensions we have, the violence we have, all those things will dissipate when people have meaningfulness in their life. And our projects, we think, give meaningfulness back to our community. And I was telling Randall this the other day that, when I was a kid, we were economic disadvantaged, right? But our neighborhoods were protective factors because we had cohesion, right? We had, Big Mama would look at one side of the block. You had 6 aunts on the other side, an uncle on the other side. And you had these folks in your neighborhood looked out for each other. There was cohesion in our community. Over time, for various reasons, that lacks. So that same neighborhood is still economically disadvantaged, and it's actually a risk factor now. So how do we recreate communities? How do we redesign and co-design communities where they still may have, for the moment, economic disadvantage, but they're not risk factors? They can be protective factors once again.
I thought it was interesting about that conversation too, Dr. Caldwell, that the cohesion comes from, and you may have hit on this before, but tenancy, as that third bottom line. You talked a lot about tenancy in retail spaces, in the creative spaces you're putting into the community, whether it be telemedicine. We've already talked about the workspaces. Those are kind of nodes of cohesion. And I thought that was an interesting concept too, in terms of just how you're holistically approaching, particularly the West Philadelphia projects.
Yeah, I mean, we have to build it back. Like, and it's not like it doesn't exist, by the way. Like, there are places where there's not enough, and there's some that are still built around health compromising behaviors, where we think if we can put the right things in our neighborhood that people want, like people actually do want to go to have coffee, to sit out. I mean, Uncle Bobby's in Germantown, that it flourishes because it gave people something like different, right? Like, right. So you can go from the zoo up to Belmont Avenue. There's no place you can go and just have a snack or a meal or a cup of coffee as a neighbor and have some convening space. So we think that can be built back into the neighborhood because the neighborhood wants it. I heard Anthony Miles say this earlier. This isn't because I want it, right? Like, this is because people in that neighborhood said, you know, we really need this. Like, we want a place where we can see each other and convene and build community again.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, there's a lack of these things, so that drives their value. Right. And sometimes we look at whether commercial space and opportunities make sense just based on, you know, the wallet of the residents, and I think that's incomplete. And then the other point you're making too, which is that you can kind of create demand. You don't always have to sit back, wait for it to be there and react to it. And I think that's part of kind of the synergistic development that you're doing. And so what was interesting too, we started talking a little bit about, somewhat jokingly, about you know, what are the ways that investment dollars would help you most. And we started talking about, you know, equity investment, and kind of the type of, I call it temperament, of the investment and the mindset. You know, what's kind of your ideal partner as you pursue these projects?
Yeah, so we've been fortunate so far. We still need to plug away at this because it's while it was kind of a once in a lifetime deal, we don't think it needs to be. We fortunately for the Steamy Workspace, on the acquisition, we had the Reinvestment Fund and Fells Foundation with Permit Capital step in and became our equity partners. And the Reinvestment Fund provided the debt. And what that did is gave us essentially a some patient capital to get to pull all the other parts of the project together, get more tenants. Because this is really a kind of an interesting project because it's both programmatic, but it's also trying to incubate small businesses around advanced manufacturing and technology. So we have to grow tenants for that, right? It's a very specific tenant for that. So that one investment of probably less than $200,000, actually, we then applied for a RAC P last year and was awarded $1 million RAC P by the state. So just that $100,000 or $200,000 from Fells and Permit ends up being $1 million.
Right.
You know, it turns into like $1 million free money, basically subsidy.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we talked about this a lot too. It's kind of like a series of dominoes, and you really need that first piece of equity, to get the process going, and that gives you optionality in terms of what you can do, so that it's appropriate, and then it also gives you optionality in terms of getting more financing, which makes the project more viable. So it's like that critical pre-development development dollar in the beginning. It seems to me what you were saying is critical.
Yeah, and that this notion of, you know, debt is easy to get, right? Equity partners who want to stay in, but also, you know, we talked about this yesterday, that have a clear exit, right? Like, you know, this is almost like a temporary holding pattern where you're going to make a little money, and then your exit event is going to give you still a little more money with a waterfall. Like, there's opportunities, right? And so I think some investors see the neighborhood condition and they don't have a big grand vision. They don't know who's actually doing it. So they think, oh, I'm going to stay in this neighborhood for a long period of time. And no, we're not. That's not the request. The request is, you know, essentially invest and, you know, access to capital, particularly for one, you know, small developers, but two, developers who are not first generation, don't have the networks. You know, the collective has been a great network for us. But there is still the opportunity, even in the collective, of really trying to figure out, like, how do we actually set this up where the capital flows and we replenish it, right? Like, that's the, you know, because there's a reason why I didn't want to be a nonprofit developer, actually, right? Like, and the limits to that. And I specifically said, even though I'm very mission oriented, it could probably be a B Corp. It is still, to me, like the free markets and capital and the way we actually, I know John talks about capital this way often. There is really opportunities to do well and do good. And we don't always see it that way because there's very few models of it, and people who are doing it don't talk about it much, right? It becomes quote unquote philanthropy. And even the philanthropists now are doing things differently with their endowments and how they use it to invest. Even some of the things that we, think about guarantees or credit enhancements. Like if you're a small developer with big dreams, and, you got a project, you have a $1 million burger in front of you, but a but a $12 million steak out there. Like
right.
It's a challenge.
Well, it comes with the open conversation about needs, because it's funny. There's capital out there that, as you were alluding to, has that exact desire to kind of come in and get out. And so, and I almost think of it sometimes it's like a good party guest, right? They're there long enough, but when it's time to go, but they're also headed out the door. So I think we're trying to, by listening to you and understanding these projects better, create financing solutions that meet those needs, both from a timing standpoint, but then also on the back end, realizing that from a monetization standpoint, there may just be different interests, and that's fine. It's just about having that open dialogue, learning the projects, learning your organization, and then kind of going from there.
Yeah.
Randall, you're sitting in New York right now, right?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. See, this is about Philadelphia, and obviously hop in. It's and it's all the money it's raised. This platform just said that we're going to kick these people out who are not really.
Yeah, I know. I was like, earlier I was better off with the carrier pigeon, but it's fine. It happens. I think Dr. Caldwell and I, we had a great conversation yesterday. That's the magic, and I think the exchange with the developers and learn about their projects. I mean, I'm glad that we're able to do this and share it with the rest of the folks. But technical difficulties happen. That's the world we live in. They happen.
Yeah. Well, I just like to ask also, as we are wrapping up. I mean, nothing is more fun for a newcomer like me to have access to not just you and your creativity and your purpose, but see you interact with the other developers in a brotherly and sisterly way.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it
goes back to the interact thing.
Sometimes I feel like you and Taib are going to start like arm wrestling or something. How do you feel about working with each other, and what's the dynamic you see in this collective?
Yeah, so Taib is my brother from another mother, right? And we love. I mean, the sign of good love and friendship is when you can kind of jab at each other and duck and move, and then you hug afterwards, and it's just fun. But I'll tell you, having been a professor in different places around the country and convened groups nationally, internationally, and been in several networks across my career for various things, there's something about really the purpose-driven nature of this and the kind of breath of fresh air to be in conversations with Anthony Fullard, and he can tell you how to navigate something. To be talking to Anthony Miles, and he's really doing the same project you're doing, but at a much grander scale with a different set. And then we call each other, right? Like there's something like, or calling Leslie and Greg and saying, hey, do you have I need a form or something, or can you tell me what the lease looks like of this? Or, like it gets that granular and sometimes that dreamy, to have each other's back. And so there's the camaraderie, but there's a true exchange of information. And so much of this work we do, because we are the first generations to do it, that exchange of information is invaluable, and we share resources in that way, because each of them has a different set of knowledge that I may have, and I may have something they may have. So that whole notion of Ujima, which is collective work and responsibility, is realized in the collective.
Makes a lot of sense.
That's the work.
That's the work. We got to get to it. I think we're winding down on time, and that was perfect question, perfect answer.
Yeah, well.
Thanks for your inspiration, Dr. Caldwell.
Thank you for your organization, and we'll get her done, as they say.
Yeah.
Talk to you. All righty.
Easy.
Take care of it.